Hello and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, where we are devoted to conversations of consequence that help democracy thrive. I'm Dan Moulthrop. I'm the chief executive here. I'm a proud member. It's Wednesday, October 13th. You're with the Virtual City Club Forum. And today we're talking with Cleveland Mayoral candidate Justin Bibb. We're less than 3 weeks away from Election Day here in Cleveland. And over the last many months, the City Club has spoken with all of the Cleveland Mayoral candidates in one-on-one conversations. And then in September, voters in the primary election narrowed it down to two candidates, Mr. Bibb and Mr. Kelly, Cleveland City Council President. Just 2 days ago, the candidates had a chance to go head-to-head in the Cleveland Mayoral debate, which we hosted in partnership with IdeaStream Public Media. And now, today and tomorrow, it's time to hear directly from the candidates one last time before Clevelanders cast their votes on November 2nd. And yes, I know that early voting has already begun, but we're doing this anyway because there's a whole lot of people who have not yet voted. And according to a recent poll, roughly 40% are undecided. We've invited both back to the City Club this week. I said that already. And today we're hearing from Justin Bibb. Tomorrow is Kevin Kelly. And over the last 15 years, Justin Bibb has worked at the intersection of government, business, and the nonprofit sector as an executive and nonprofit leader. Way back when he interned for then U.S. Senator Barack Obama, served as a special assistant for the Cuyahoga County Executive, served as head of the Global Cities Practice at Gallup, and vice president for KeyBank. And he is currently strategy officer at Urbanova, where he advises city leaders around the country on planning, economic and community development, and other issues. He's one of two people who might become the next mayor of Cleveland. Well, one of them will. Last time we spoke with Justin, it was February of this year. He had just announced his campaign for mayor. And in our conversation then, we discussed some of the issues Cleveland is facing, the digital divide, high poverty rates, justice reform, the health of downtown Cleveland, to name a few issues. After winning the primary race and after his appearance at our debate, it's time for follow-ups. Our goal here today and tomorrow is to get past the talking points and to get off script a little bit, and not just to hear ideas, but to hear the plan to actually execute on those ideas. If you have a question, text us 330-541-5794. That's 330-541-5794. The number's on the screen. You can also tweet your question at the City Club, and we'll work it in. Special welcome is in order, too, for members of the Western Reserve chapter of the Links Incorporated, who are a community partner for our forums both today and tomorrow. Justin Bibb, welcome back to the City Club of Cleveland.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be back.
It is great to have you. I was noticing on Twitter earlier today that you have a forum with the Urban League coming up tonight, and it struck me that this calendar, this campaign calendar, is relentless.
It's brutal, brother. It is brutal, but we're doing the hard work to win this thing.
I hear you. Have there been any? I know that some of these forums and these candidate forums that you and Council President Kelly are doing can be a little bit repetitive. But have there been any that have really stood out to you as really important moments where you learned something or were presented with a question that you hadn't heard before?
You know, I think the biggest thing I've learned in these forums is how to keep your composure when your opponent might say something that's ridiculous, because someone's always watching, right? And how I carry myself in every forum should give voters an indication of how I'm going to lead the city. And so I don't think there's been one forum that's kind of caught me off guard, but I've had a lot of moments where I had to make sure I keep my composure when I didn't want to sometimes, if I'm being brutally honest.
I appreciate your honesty. I mean, that's kind of what we're after today.
Yeah.
One of the things that has come up, and there was a piece that was pretty widely circulated over the last 24 hours that Mark Namick did at WKYC about your resume, essentially. And you and I were talking about it just before this, and kind of agreed that it's an accurate piece, and you were quoted accurately in it. The question that comes up, I guess, sometimes is like, in that resume, which isn't all that dissimilar to a lot of people of your generation, right, who move around a lot just because of the way the job market is and the way, whatever. I mean, I've had a gazillion jobs in the course of my life. But what is it in your resume that you think uniquely prepares you for the job?
I think there are a couple of things. I think one, I've had exposure early on at working at some of the highest levels of every sector in this country. Although I was just a Senate intern for Obama when he was in the U.S. Senate, I learned a lot about what good leadership looks like and how to run a good staffing office in government office. At 21, I was an associate partner at the global research consulting firm Gallup. And my boss, the chairman and CEO, Jim Clifton, told me to try to build $1 million business in a year. And I had no idea on how to start a business, but I did it, right? With no real business plan. And when I came back home to work for the first county executive, it was my first real crash course in working in local government. And I was this bright-eyed 23-year-old kid from DC who thought that I knew everything about education policy. And a member of county council said to me, look, I don't care about your ideas. What's in it for me? And that's when I really learned that politics and change is really about relationship building, regardless how smart you are.
It's also very transactional.
Yeah.
Simple question, right? What's in it for me?
Exactly. And I also learned, I think, the importance of owning my own career destiny, right? I am not ashamed of the work I've done. I'm not ashamed of my resume. I embrace it. Namik brought up a brief stint I had at the National Conference on Citizenship for about 5 months. And the reason I came home as well was my dad was really sick. And being able to work with the county government, but also being home with my dad and be with him in his formative years before he passed away was something I don't regret. Life happens, but in every job I've had significant responsibility, significant exposure, and made significant impact and change. And I think the biggest thing folks want in a leader, regardless if it's mayor or council or president or member of Congress, they want a leader who can listen. They want a leader who can admit when they're wrong. They want a leader who's transparent, and they want someone that they can relate to and that understands their pain, right? And I think not only my professional career, but my lived experience and life experience makes me well suited to not only run the city, but also lead the city with the right empathy I think we need moving forward in this community.
I've been soliciting questions from the community on Twitter for the last week or so, and there's a related question that about this. And I know you've had conversations with Mayor White and Mayor Campbell, both of whom have endorsed you, about the work, what the work actually is. So you probably have a better sense of it than say other candidates in the primary who haven't served before, or than I do for that matter. But the question that a community member asked was, what are you most worried about? Like, what is the part of the job that you think you might find most challenging?
Dan, one of the things that keeps me up at night about the job is how do I find the emotional capacity and vulnerability and empathy to console a mother who's lost their child to gun violence? And how do you build that internal reservoir when that happens day after day after day after day? And then how do you compartmentalize that experience and go and pitch the city in a corporate boardroom the following hour, right? But that's really been my life in many cases, right? I mean, growing up where I grew up, I always had to navigate multiple worlds, right? Black, white, poor, rich, east side, west side. And
code switching.
Yeah. And that's real, right? But how do you do it in a way where you don't lose your authentic self? I think that's why my faith is so important. That's why staying grounded with my family and friends is so important, because some moments it's going to be hard to do that. But as mayor, I got to find that resilience when sometimes I might not have it.
Where do you go to church?
I've been a proud member of Olivet Institutional Baptist Church for over 10 years now. Reverend Colvin, one of my spiritual mentors.
The question came up during the debate about about issue 24. I don't want to get into a big conversation about issue 24. We're doing a debate on that actually on the 22nd.
Oh,
so
great.
For our audience right now, you should be sure to join us. You can join us in person here in this very room. But the question that Nick Castell posed to you was kind of you've supported issue 24. You're very vocal about that, and the police force has been very sort of equally adamant about its opposition. Which sets up, if you become mayor, it sets up a kind of a fault line there for you to manage the police force that is disagreeing with you on a fundamentally important issue, a fundamentally central issue here. How will you get past that fault line and build the bridge?
Everyone knows in this campaign that I'm a son of a cop, right? So I want to belabor that point. But I think it's important because I know what's at risk here with this decision. And I also know the importance of it. The officers I've talked to in our department tell me a couple of things. Number one, they want fairness, right? They want fairness with a police chief that's going to promote based on merit, not based on who you know or what's politically convenient. Our officers want to be fairly compensated. So we got to pay them more to make sure that we have an attractive department. But at the same time, officers want discipline that is just, equal, and fair. And this commission gives that accountability and fairness, not just to protect that fairness internally inside the department, but to protect residents. What's dangerous to me is the fact that we spent over $30 million over the last 10 years selling police misconduct claims. What's dangerous to me is when we call accountability a buzzword, right? We recognize, and many officers will tell you this, that the police can't continue to police themselves. And when I'm knocking on doors in this city, I've talked to many residents, particularly in the East Side, they say in some cases they are scared to call the police. Number one, because they don't show up when they want them to show up, because they don't trust them. Right.
Well, that was a question that came up in the primary debate.
Yeah. And so I believe that trust and equal justice is the fundamental building block we need to have safe and secure communities and neighborhoods in the city. And I'm willing to fight for more accountability and more teeth in our civilian review board and police commission so we can root out racism, root out bias, and give our officers the tools they need to show up and do good police work. That's what I'm committed to doing. I want to work with the union on this. I want to work with law enforcement. I want to work with our activists and labor partners as well. Everyone should have a seat at the table, especially those that have been victimized by police.
You mentioned accountability as a buzzword. You were alluding to what Kevin Kelly said in the debate. He referred to buzzwords and so forth, and in kind of his explaining his opposition to issue 24. In that debate and in that exchange that many of our audience members may have actually either heard in the debate or heard this morning on the After Jackson podcast, good friend Nick Castell, who moderated the debate, you said that you said that the council president doesn't believe in democracy. What did you mean by that?
I think his actions speak for themselves.
Which actions?
Number one, when over 20,000 folks mobilized to get their petition signed to vote on the Quicken Loans deal, he denied their petitions. My pastor went to the council's office, and the council president sat there with a large cup of soda and said, "We aren't going to accept these petitions." And that's visibly clear. Minimum wage happens. Folks all across this community knocked on doors to get the ability to vote on a $15 minimum wage. And regardless if you agree with the merit of the policy, this council president worked with Republican lobbyists and denied the ability to vote on a minimum wage in Cleveland. And just recently, you had amazing activists across this community like Paula Camp, and it's her birthday today, so happy birthday, Paula. Paula Camp, Nora Kelly, Jessica Trevisano, Latanya Goldsby, and others who wanted to put public comment in City Hall for the first time in nearly 100 years.
City council meetings, yeah.
Yeah, and we barely got public comment. We had to fight to get a real robust public comment period inside City Council. And so those actions make me believe that my opponent does not believe in the power and the importance of resident voice and recognizing the will of the people. And so when people ask me, Justin, why don't people show up and vote in a mayor's race? Why don't people show up and vote in downturn?
I'm glad you're bringing that up. That's another question that one of our audience members, our community members, offered. You know,
the reason why is we don't just have voter suppression in this state because of Republican politicians in Columbus. We have a voter suppression because people in Cleveland don't believe in the importance of resident voice. They believe that they alone have the answers. Let's talk about the Let's Safe Coalition and the work that Clash did to finally get our city government to tackle the lead paint crisis in the city. Again, activist-led efforts have been stirring the consciousness of the city for a long time, not career politicians, in my opinion.
Just to continue on with some of what came up in the debate and your critique, implicit and explicit critique of Council President Kevin Kelly, you said during the debate that you want to treat, as mayor, you would treat council as a co-equal branch of government. The implication that I heard there was that it is not currently a co-equal branch of government. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, it's not treated as such. Let me tell you why I believe that. One, I've talked to so many members of council, and I will not disclose their names, but they feel left in the dark. Many feel frustrated that they were let known at the last minute about the recent progressive field renovation deal. Many were left in the dark about the fact that for nearly 2 years we weren't recycling in the city. And this administration has stonewalled council on so many issues. Councilman Kerry McCormick had to threaten to sue the mayor's office to get certain records or get certain legislation executed inside city government. We have to make sure that members of council know what's happening before it becomes public. They have to have input on what our governing agenda and vision is in the city. And I think one of the things I can do as mayor is to do a better job of connecting my cabinet, my administration into the neighborhoods with members of council so they can have a better pulse of making sure we can better connect resources and information to our neighborhoods. Because the issue we have right now is our local government is so outdated in many ways and unresponsive that members of council have to do the mayor's job as well as be a legislature, right? And they don't have the time to do a lot of the policy making they would want to do, like you see in other cities across the country. That's why I'm a big believer in exploring having members being at large at city council. So you can get more robust policy making between the executive branch and the legislative branch inside city government.
I think what you're saying about what city council members do, and my experience with council members with whom I've spoken about this, is that they spend so much time on constituent service, basic one-on-one constituent service. A tenant needs help with a dispute with their landlord, or there's a chuck hole on their street, or a light is out, or the garbage hasn't been picked up, or a building permit is needed for a small business owner, that they can't get up and look around and see the bigger issue. Is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly. And I think the city would be better served if council had more time to do that long-term visioning and policy making in conjunction with the mayor's office, right? I think that would make us a more robust city long-term.
Let's get into some policy stuff. In the debate, you said that you wanted to create an endowment to deal with lead, and it wasn't entirely. There wasn't enough time for you to really explain what you meant. So could you explain what you? lead poisoning rate, as I think all of our audience knows, is unconscionably unconscionable. It's just an unconscionable rate right now, and is one of the highest in the nation.
Yeah, I was alluding to the recommendation that was made by Councilwoman Jenny Spencer and Councilman Kerry McCormick that we should allocate, I believe, $17 to $20 million from the American Rescue Plan to support the Lead Safe Coalition and fully funding the endowment that would eradicate lead paint over time.
You're talking about the Lead Safe Home Fund?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So there's currently, according to Rachel DeSalle, who is a reporter in town, does a lot of work with the Cleveland Documenters and other projects. There's currently millions in that fund that is being unused.
Yeah.
Residents aren't tapping into it yet. Do we know why that is and what needs to be done in order to remediate the problem?
Yeah. Let me tell you what I've heard.
Okay.
One, our building and housing department needs better staffing and more connectivity with some of our grassroots community-based partners to identify better ways to remediate these homes that have lead. The other thing that I've heard is the grant programs that could exist, don't exist, that could support those landlords that probably can't afford to remediate their homes as well. And this is where I think having some of our banking partners around the table could support us long-term in a more effective way. And then thirdly, information. I know that the Lead Safe Coalition has done some great work to put more community members on the street, to knock on doors and talk to residents about remediating these homes and getting up to code. But we need to double down on that work and make sure that residents know the importance of this and how the city government can support them in doing it.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah.
Another policy question has to do with systemic structural racism. And in the letter Dear Mayor series that the Center for Community Solutions put out, one of the staffers, solution staffers, who's also a resident, Lauren Anthus, also City Club member, by the way.
Also one of the smartest minds on public health policies in Cleveland.
Health policy he's incredible. But he talked about in his letter, I'm not going to quote it, but I'm just going to kind of discuss what he talked about: redlining, the connection between equity, historic redlining, HOLC maps, poverty, and the health outcomes that we currently see. Eliminating structural racism is an imperative for both campaigns. It's an imperative for the community. Racism was declared a public health crisis last year by city council. The question really is, what exactly are you going to do about it? And how will you measure your success? Like, what are the metrics you're going to look at? How will you know that you've made a difference?
Well, let's look internally, and then let's talk about externally for a second. I mentioned this in the debate. I want to operationalize a racial equity framework inside my administration. That's why I want to have a cabinet position with staff decked against that cabinet position around racial equity that works across every department to make sure that we don't further exacerbate racism and inequity in the city, but that we can be more progressive and more forward-looking on what tools and policies can we create inside city government to eradicate structural racism. Externally, there are a couple of things I want to do. One, I've advocated for not only taking this $512 million that we're getting from President Biden and leveraging that capital to a couple of billion, but a large share of that money should be spent on direct neighborhood investments, particularly in the east side of the city, where we've seen a hollowing out of our Black population, and the Black middle class has been decimated. I mean, housing values have been depressed on the east side. Most of them have not recovered since the Great Recession in 2008. And I believe between the Great Recession and 2018, we raised about $10 billion of private capital to bring back downtown and parts of the west side. I believe over the next decade, we should try to raise at least $5 billion to bring back the east side as a starting point. And that's an aggressive goal, right? Because until you see real economic opportunity in Lee Harvard, Mount Pleasant, and Buckeye, then I don't think long-term we will be a city that reaches full potential. And supporting the Black middle class, supporting Black home ownership, supporting Black businesses is essential to that. And as mayor, I want to try to use every tool inside City Hall and use the bully pulpit of the office to do that long term. The metrics we should look at: a decrease in the infant mortality rate we see among Black children in the city, a decrease in Black child poverty, an increase in not only high school graduation, but the employment prospects that Black and brown people have in the city once they graduate from CMSD. And this gets me really excited because, as you know, Dan, we are moving towards being a majority minority nation over the next couple of decades. And Cleveland is a majority Black city. And, the promise of our city is rooted in the promise of how Black Clevelanders feel in this city. And if Black people are succeeding in Cleveland, everybody can win, in my opinion. And I truly believe that.
It's, as you were saying that, I was reminded of the Bloomberg story that I just read this morning that covered that's covering the race, that opens with a woman who has relocated, returned to Cleveland from Atlanta.
Yeah.
She's like scratching her head, like, what is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, we get these comparisons of, should we be like Pittsburgh or Indianapolis? And I think Atlanta is a good North Star for us. And they're great models to look at, but we have so much work to do to catch up to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. And we can't afford to do this in a piecemeal approach, in my opinion. That's one of the big reasons why I got in this race.
I want to get to questions that are coming in right now, and remind you that if you have a question for Justin Bibb, he could be the next mayor of the city of Cleveland. And of course, that's not only important to the city of Cleveland, but to the entire region. So everybody's invited to ask a question. I don't get to vote in this race because I live in Shaker Heights, but God, it's such a privilege to be able to do these conversations with you guys and provide a platform for these questions, for these answers, for you to connect, Justin, with constituents and stakeholders.
Yeah.
If you'd like to text a question, it's 330-541-5794, 330-541-5794. If you want to tweet it at the City Club, and we'll work it in. One of the questions that came in from our community partners at the Western Reserve chapter of the Links Incorporated. We understand that there are gas stations that remain open 24 hours a day, corner stores there as well, where illegal drugs are being sold. We believe that this kind of illegal activity perpetuates gun violence in the central neighborhood. What will you do in your first 100 days in office to address the violence and safety issues, specifically in Central?
One of the biggest challenges that I've recognized in this campaign around gun violence and violence in general is, as a city, we don't have a comprehensive community safety plan. Just last week, I was talking to Jeff Scott, who runs the Boys and Girls Club, and he mentioned this to me that he experienced about 9 shootings in just a week with kids all under the age, I believe, of 18. And the Peacemakers Alliance is doing their thing in silos. Boys and Girls Club is doing their thing. City Hall is doing their thing. And we don't talk enough about how we need to have a more comprehensive community plan around public safety. And in my first 100 days, I want to make sure I'm bringing those voices around the table in order to enact that. Secondly, I talked a lot about this throughout the campaign, redeploying our officers more in an effective way so they're visible, walking the beat, not just in their cars, but doing foot patrols, talking to residents. And again, that's why issue 24 is so important, so that residents can trust the police when they're walking in the street and they feel like they're a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And then the other big thing we see in this city is the trafficking of illegal guns. Right now, Cleveland is one of the only cities, I believe, in the state that is not a part of the Ohio Safety Gun Consortium. I intend to join that in my first 100 days as mayor, something that GCC has called for that I completely agree with. We got to work more with the Ohio Mayors Alliance, which I intend to join as mayor of Cleveland, to make sure
hold on a second. Do you know why that is? Like, why isn't
I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea. And this is a body looking at innovative ways for cities to crack down on the trafficking of illegal guns in the city. And the Ohio Mayor's Alliance could be leveraged as well to put more pressure on our governor and state legislature to give cities like Cleveland more legal authority to crack down on the trafficking of illegal guns. And then I intend to work aggressively with the next U.S. attorney as well to make sure we can prosecute those who traffic or use illegal guns in the city to the full extent of the law. But broadly speaking, though, Dan,
how about specifically speaking, first 100 days, central neighborhood?
Yeah. Well, and central specifically, more robust funding for after school programs in that neighborhood. I was in Central a couple of weeks ago talking to a community activist, and he said the pool was barely open near the Outwith housing projects last summer. And this is an amazing Olympic-sized pool. You go to the Lonnie Burton Recreation Center. We need more active programming there. Our children need stuff to do.
Why we have these facilities? Why is it? What's the disconnect?
No connectivity, no accountability, and no real, I think, responsiveness to the needs of what our children want. And this is why having youth from the neighborhood talking to me as mayor and my team about what they want to see in those rec centers is so important, because I can't make up ideas from my ivory tower at 601 Lakeside Avenue thinking that that's going to be the solution. You know, I was at Kenneth Clement Academy several weeks ago, and you know what the biggest after school program kids wanted there? Gaming and coding.
Sure.
So and so if you ask children what they want, they'll tell you. Yeah. And so it's important that we give our children a seat at the table, because this is their city too.
Justin, the debate this week was sponsored in part by the Assembly for the Arts. And they've asked, it's obviously important to Assembly that the arts are kind of on the agenda as a real tool for the public and a piece of the public dialogue. This got some airtime during the debate, but not a ton. We have public funding for the arts in Cuyahoga County, but we don't have a really strong voice for the arts in City Hall.
No. I'm really excited to see the work that the Assembly is doing. They brought in some great leadership in town, a native Clevelander to run that effort. And I stopped by the font kickoff party as well last week. And we just have an amazing arts infrastructure that we've truly yet to, I think, maximize as a city. That's why I've called for having a cabinet level position in my administration around arts, culture, and just the overall tourism experience in Cleveland, so we can really double down and maximize investments in the arts. I want to have an artist in residence in my administration, because our artists can really help me think about how to better design city services to meet the needs of our residents. I get excited about.
So wait, so an artist in residence isn't just like you give somebody an office, they turn it into studio space and there's paint.
No, I know. I mean, think about how we design a flyer, right, for a senior citizen to make it more enticing to use a city service. Or you think about how we can better program TV 20 visually and from a storytelling perspective to make sure that people actually watch TV 20 and leverage that asset, particularly for our seniors that actually do watch TV 20. You think about how we would design our website, right, to make it more user-friendly for folks that are coming to the city's website. And even the experience that you get when you walk inside City Hall, our artists in our community can help us think about how to better design and activate City Hall as a public space for the people. To make it more enticing. And so those are things I get excited about, and even helping my administration design the right aesthetics we need to have in our parks that reflect the diversity and reflect the culture of our city.
Another City Hall question, and this comes from the community of journalists and people who love journalism. But the current administration has developed a reputation for not being entirely transparent, slow walking public records requests, and so forth. What's your commitment in that regard?
We need to treat the press with the respect they deserve. You shouldn't have to get approval from the mayor or my chief of communications to talk to the press. I want to empower my cabinet to have conversations about what's happening in the city, whether that be holding weekly or biweekly press conferences, and having a very efficient process to track public records requests as well. Because again, a robust public media, I think, is essential for a robust city, and robust public engagement is critical to that.
Question for you from one of our listeners. I haven't heard much about Mr. Bibb's ideas on creating accessible mental health services for residents. These individuals have health needs, but also economic and public safety needs. With the higher than the national average rates of depression and suicide, how do we serve these citizens?
Well, one of the things I've talked extensively about throughout this campaign is adding another option to 911 around mental health and trauma. So when you call 911, it'll be fire, police, EMS, and then mental health. And, training.
Have you done in other cities?
I'm not sure exactly if that has. I believe that some mayors have talked about this, particularly with them creating a co-responder model of policing, where social workers and mental health professionals join cops for nonviolent 911 calls. But it's not just training. It's not just adding another option to 911, but training all of our staff and our dispatch center on the right way to respond to mental health or trauma related calls. And I believe we should have comprehensive training inside city government for city hall employees around trauma informed care and trauma informed policy making. The other thing I would say is I don't believe we have a comprehensive mental health facility in the city of Cleveland. And I think that's a missing piece of this. And then currently right now, our prosecutor is not using our diversion center.
The city prosecutor.
City prosecutor is not using our diversion center.
Why is that?
You tell me. I don't know. I don't know. But our other suburban police departments are. RTA police is using it. And this is a dedicated facility to get people the substance abuse, drug abuse, and counseling and mental health counseling they need without sending them to prison. This should be a day one action for the next mayor, and it will be if I'm elected.
You bring up the issues, a lot of issues that are connected to the diversion center as part of the criminal justice reform efforts.
Yeah.
Bail reform is another one. But the probably the most significant opportunity to institutionalize reform is with the new Justice Center. It's a Cuyahoga County project in which the city of Cleveland and the next mayor will have a very significant voice. Talk about that. Talk about your priorities there, what you'd like to see happen.
I'm really concerned about our quickness to just build a new jail without talking about some structural changes we need to make in our criminal justice system in Cleveland. As you know, many of our residents in Cleveland that we arrest now go to the county jail. Some have died due to the conditions in our county jail. And I'm going to hold the next county executive, whoever that may be, accountable to make sure we prioritize mental health and meeting the needs of our residents versus just building a new jail as a solution. That's why ending cash bail is so important. That's why having a dedicated mental health facility in the city of Cleveland is so important. And that's why I believe putting more accountability on the executive to make sure that we have the right conditions in place and the right supports in place in those facilities is critical. I mean, it's a shame to see what's happening now with the former jail director now going to jail himself. It's just a lack of leadership at large on this issue in our community.
Also connected to this issue around mental health services and criminal justice reform is the homelessness in Cleveland, or the unhoused, the unsheltered, many of whom often get caught up in the criminal justice system. the Cleveland faces, this is another question from our audience, the shelter on Lakeside, which is run by Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries, cannot take everyone. That is also just a men's shelter at 2100 Lakeside. What is your short-term plan to address the immediate needs of the homeless? And what's your long-term plan to reduce the population of unhoused people in general?
I think short-term, we need to reevaluate the benefits criteria we have about who gets access to housing when they're homeless. I spent some time at 2100 Lakeside, and I discovered that in some cases, you got to prove that you've been chronically homeless for, I believe, nearly 18 months before you can get a housing voucher in some cases. To me, that makes no sense. And other models I've been looking at in Houston and San Diego, they have a housing first policy where they just get you in a home.
We have housing first programs here, very successful in Cleveland.
Yeah.
But they've provided somewhere around 1,000 homes or whatever the number is. Still, right?
Yeah, but even when I was at the men's shelter, many told me that they were there because they had to prove they were chronically homeless before they qualified for that voucher, right? Mm-hmm. So I think in some cases, who's eligible for what, there's a lot of disconnect in how you can navigate those services. In the models I've looked at in Houston and San Diego, the city has a housing first homeless policy where they provide a housing voucher at the city level. And then they've started to fast track more permanent supportive housing inside their respective cities. Now, I know we've seen some good success with that in Cleveland, and we got to expand that where we can. The other model is in San Antonio, where they have a dedicated campus where their homeless population can get all the services they need so they can start to live a life of dignity and get their life back on track. And that's another option we should take a look at long term.
Given that the mayor is another question from our audience, given that the mayor appoints the school board to the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, but otherwise doesn't have direct control, how do you propose to build on the progress CMSD has made over the last decade? And since the board isn't elected, how will you ensure the community voice is heard on schools in Cleveland?
Yeah. One of the biggest frustrations I've heard from voters is just a lack of parent voice around the table, and also student voice around the table in terms of public education. So I would want to prioritize parents who have students in the district on the board. And I would also say this, the Cleveland plan was a great step in the right direction. We have some good models, John Hay Science Academy, Campus International, et cetera. But these are all islands of excellence, and we're still trying to work to create a system of excellence. It's going to be my job as mayor to find, what are the barriers that we see to increase the pace of change more quickly. Am I frustrated with the pace of change? Yes, I am. Like many parents are. Have we made change? Yes. But I talked about this earlier. There's still a lot of disconnects between what happens at City Hall and what's going on at CMSD, right? In many cases last year, our schools were closed, and then our rec centers weren't open and pools weren't open. And so City Hall must be further integrated, I believe, with what's happening with our children inside CMSD to really close these gaps long term, because it's not just a K through 12 problem anymore. It's a community-wide problem.
How do you feel about the progress of Say Yes in addressing some of these needs?
Listen, I think Say Yes is a great asset that we have. However, as mayor, I'm going to prioritize more straight to work options when kids graduate from CMSD, because you got to recognize that every kid's not going to go to college, and that's okay. And so how do we build a pathway where a child can graduate from CMSD and get an apprenticeship or an internship at Cleveland Clinic or Eaton, and maybe they go to school part-time, or they enter that career immediately when they graduate from CMSD with several credentials. And I know that leaders inside the district and leaders from our foundation community are working on programs like that. And those are the kind of innovations I want to explore and double down on if elected mayor.
Well, Say Yes is the sort of headline of Say Yes is around the college scholarships. But as you know, the bulk of the program is actually providing wraparound services and coordination of care where it's needed, and really like, equipping schools to assist and support families where whatever their needs are, whether it's out of school time programming or a referral for some sort of other social work need, or house connection to legal aid to resolve a housing dispute or something like that. Do you see the scaling of those programs happening? Like, what will you do to ensure that we get to scale across the whole district?
Well, I think COVID probably slowed down the pace and progress around scaling that. And I would want to invest in scaling in what works as soon as I possibly could as mayor. There's a great model program I've spent some time with in Slavic Village, the P16 project with the Third Federal Foundation has invested in. That's a great model. You have Open Doors Academy as another great model. And so I would want to take a look at those too.
Yeah. Full disclosure, my wife runs Open Doors
Academy.
Sorry. No. Hey, I'm like, yay. Yeah, mention that.
Yeah.
Another question, unrelated to what we've just been talking about, has to do with your filings with the Ohio Elections Ethics Commission.
Yeah.
There were some amendments or more information was required. Can you explain what happened and
Absolutely.
how you got it wrong in the beginning? How you fixed it?
Listen, honest mistake. I was on the board of RTA for nearly 3 years. I filled out the form wrong. When I got word of that mistake, I updated it immediately and actually submitted more information that was required. And I did that to show folks in the city that I want to be a transparent mayor because I have nothing to hide.
Okay. While we're on that topic, there's the question regarding your background has come up a few times about the number of meetings that you missed when you were on the RTA board, or the number of meetings you missed when you were on the Charter Review Commission. Can you address those concerns?
Yeah. During my time on the Charter Review Commission and during my time when I was on the board of RTA, I did extensive travel as a business leader at Gallup. And when I was at KeyBank, I had some very important required meetings to attend at Key. And unfortunately, I couldn't make every meeting. But despite the fact that I wasn't able to come to every meeting, I still made a big impact, particularly on the board of RTA, in terms of the work we did to really modernize that agency with more technology and innovation to improve the rider experience.
You were appointed to the board of RTA because you applied for that position. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was encouraged to apply by the county executive. That's correct.
And the ways in which those commission appointments are made is not an entirely transparent process. And it's hard to know what's available, why anybody might want to serve on, say, the boxing commission or whatever else is. And there are like dozens and dozens of these commissions that, and they're actually like positions that come with a stipend, with actual money for your time of service. What will you do to ensure that those are transparent and that you actually audit like the commissions and see if they actually need to exist? I'm sure there's got to be some that no longer are needed.
Well, the city of Minneapolis does a really good job with this, where they actually do an audit, I believe, every other year of not just city hall staff, but every board and commission to make sure it reflects the diversity of the community. And that's something I intend to do if elected mayor. We should be vocalizing what boards and commission appointments are available online, advertising them with community organizations and grassroots organizations as well, and make sure they truly reflect what our city looks like. I mean, I was appointed to the board of Tri-C at the ripe young age of 23. I think board service is a great opportunity to understand how government works, understand how nonprofits work, and it gives you the ability to make an impact in a very substantial way.
Another question, and a reminder, if you do have a question for Justin Bibb, and as you know, if you're watching this, he's running for mayor, he wants your vote. You can text your question to 330-541-5794 or tweet it at the City Club, and we'll try to work it into these final minutes of the program. The Willow Avenue Bridge has been in the news over the past few years. We have this great new trail to Wendy Park with a bridge, a brand new bridge there, but there's a bottleneck to get to the trail with the failing Willow Avenue Bridge. This is a very specific question, but this is what happens at City Club events. You sometimes get very specific questions.
Yeah.
Thousands of trucks go over that, and for years have caused respiratory issues for low-income residents in the CMHA facility there, the Cuyahoga Metro Housing Authority facility there at Lakeview Terraces. The city has not been entirely transparent about how to replace the Willow Avenue Bridge in a way that diminishes the environmental justice concerns of Lakeview residents. What is your plan there?
Yeah. From my recollection, Councilman Zone at the time and Councilman McCormick, I think, gave the city a solid proposal about how we can divert that traffic that was going across that bridge that would allow it to have higher air quality versus what we see now. And the city kind of got in the way of that, right? And so I would try to work with Councilman McCormick to make sure we have the right policy in place to remediate that long term.
In terms of, this brings up a series of kind of environmental justice and public engagement kinds of things where you have two different sort of points of view, at least two different points of view, or two different kinds of stakeholders, residents. And in the case of this, the thing that hasn't been mentioned is the Ontario Stone, really important historic business in the flats provides a certain amount of tax revenue to the city, no doubt, and is an important piece of the fabric there. What our friend Chris Ronayne might refer to as the messy urban vitality of that neighborhood. How do you manage all of that? If you've got one constituent of business against a group of residents, and you've talked a lot about elevating activist voice and resident voice, but residents also need jobs.
Yeah. What's good for the environment should be good for business. And that's how I'll make decisions in the city as mayor. I've talked a lot about Cleveland Public Power and the fact that, we're getting our power from the third largest carbon emitter in this country. And because of that, Cleveland is directly undermining our ability as a nation to achieve the Paris climate goals.
Thank you for bringing that up. You're talking about the AMP Ohio.
It's crazy. And I don't know about you, but who enters a 50-year contract? And
the city of Cleveland.
Yeah, I guess so. And, they bankrolled a new plant based on that contract. And now our residents are paying 2 to 3 times the market rate for electricity. And we haven't had any real accountability from this council leadership or mayor to hold them accountable. No hearings on this issue as of recently. And folks want change in terms of Cleveland Public Power. And I believe our long-term opportunity in Cleveland to be not just a national leader, but a global leader in climate justice and the green jobs of the future, it starts with turning around CPP, modernizing an asset for the green jobs of the future, and making Cleveland a national model on what leveraging the green economy can look like.
If you're in the contract, though, you're going to inherit that contract if you become mayor, right? So it's like saying, I want to renegotiate the contract is sort of a really easy thing to say.
It's hard to do. Don't get me wrong. It's hard to do. That's why who I select as my law director will be one of my most important hires. I've already talked to several leaders from our foundation community about getting their support as well on this issue. And other leaders in Columbus have also reached out about the importance of Cleveland going to fight on this issue as well. And so I'm going to use every arsenal in my toolkit, and I'm going to need the support of the people to take the fight to AMP. And I'm looking forward to the fight.
It's not a fight I would look forward to, but
I'm a glutton for punishment, as they say. That's why I'm running for mayor, I guess, huh?
With $20 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds allocated to bridge the digital divide in Cleveland, this is an allocation recently made by City Council. Would you look into partnering up with Cuyahoga County, who already has a plan in place to not only make Cleveland a more connected city, but the county and areas in the county that, similar to Cleveland, are some of the worst connected places in the nation?
This is why many members of council were so upset a couple of weeks ago with the fact that we're rushing all these decisions without council having a real say and without the people having a real say. Now, am I excited that we allocated this money to address digital divide? Absolutely. But with no public input, that makes me concerned. And I want to applaud the work of the CIO at the county around doing a countywide RFP. And the city should be, I think, a key partner in making sure we can leverage that knowledge and information to get this right, not just for the city, but for the whole region.
What is your opinion about city council members appointing successors prior to a new term?
Well, I'm not running for city council, but I would say that it is past time to look at some ways to modernize our charter to address that issue, as well as, term limits. When I announced my campaign for mayor, I said this does not belong to one man or one woman. It belongs to the people of Cleveland. And I think having a hard conversation about what the future of our charter should look like when it comes to council, when it comes to the mayor's office, would give people more confidence that democracy is working for them.
Justin, what's on your calendar for the rest of the week?
More forums.
Where can people find you?
More forums, more meet and greets. And the best thing I like to do as a candidate for office is knock on doors. So I'm knocking on some doors this weekend. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Justin Bibb is one of two candidates running to become your next mayor in the city of Cleveland. And Justin, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you, Dan. Talk soon, my friend. Thanks for having me. Good luck to you. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for joining us for our virtual forum today with mayoral candidate Justin Bibb. Our community partner is the Western Reserve chapter of the Links Incorporated. And we thank you so much for your engagement today and for helping us get the word out. All of our virtual forums are presented for free thanks to generous support from Bank of America, PNC, and the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. You can join them in supporting our mission by making a contribution online or becoming a member or texting the word donate to 216-616-CLUB. That's 216-616-2582. And follow a few easy steps to make your donation. Thank you in advance for that. We'll be continuing our conversations with Cleveland mayoral candidates tomorrow, October 14th, with Council President Kevin Kelly. Be sure to watch us, join us here at noon, right here at cityclub.org. And if you missed our debate on Monday night, you can catch it on our website, cityclub.org as well. You're also invited to join us on Friday, October 15th, for a forum presented in collaboration with Velocity. This is a conversation about the NBA and the WNBA and their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, which are leading in professional sports. We'll be welcoming Kevin Clayton, who's Vice President of DE&I, Diversity, Inclusion, and Engagement with the Cleveland Cavaliers, Oris Stewart, Chief People and Inclusion Officer at the NBA, and Bonnie Thurston, Director for WNBA Player Programs. Tickets are still available, but they're going fast. That brings us to the end of our forum today. Thank you all so much for being a part of it. Thank you, Justin. Our forum is now adjourned.